right, good evening. I now call the March 18th, 2024 special meeting of the City Council to order. I'll ask Mrs. Hoffman to take roll call, please.
Ms. Nicely,
Present.
Mr. Cahill,
Present.
Ms. Kyle,
Here.
Mr. Skidmore,
Here.
Mr. Hermes,
Here.
Ms. Skidmore, Ms. Reckers,
Here.
Ms. Jasper Lucas,
Here.
Ms. Wilson.
Here.
All right, thank you. I'm going to do my best Jack Gatlin impression and read our legislation. So number one, it's a second reading for the Atlas Air KBI, an ordinance of the City of Erlanger, Kentucky, amending ordinance number 2525, which provided for a credit of its occupational license fee for new employees as part of an economic development project by Atlas Air, Inc., under the Kentucky Business Investment Program. Do I entertain a motion that we adopt this ordinance as read? Ms. Reckers, Ms. Kyle, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cahill,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hermes,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Skidmore, Ms. Reckers,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Nicely,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Wilson, Ms. Jasper Lucas,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Kyle,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Skidmore.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Legislation number two, surplus property, a municipal order of the City of Erlanger in Kenton County, Kentucky, making the written determinations required by KRS 82.8083 for the sale or other disposition of property owned by the city. This is a municipal order. Do I entertain a motion that we adopt this municipal order as read? Ms. Reckers, Ms. Nicely, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Do I entertain a motion that we adjourn the special meeting? Ms. Kyle, Ms. Nicely, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We will be back at 7 o'clock. All right, it's 7 o'clock. We'll open up the City Council caucus meeting for March 19th. The first item up for discussion is the Alta Fiber franchise agreement. Mr. Gatlin, are you taking this topic?
Sure. Sort of a housekeeping matter. Our franchise is up with Cincinnati Bell Fiber Optics, and we need to renew the franchise with them. So we're probably going to have a first reading probably in 2 weeks. I know that I have sent this to Peter and Kevin just to see if there was any input from Public Works on any changes that we would want or anything that Alta Fiber or Cincinnati Bell has done in our last franchise that we wanted to work on this time. Nothing. So this is not a franchise that we collect a fee on. This is literally just a franchise for them to have access to our right-of-way. This is their proposal of the changes that they want to make. Again, it may or may not be ready for a first reading, but I at least wanted to bring it to council's attention that it was floating out there. Does anyone have any questions about it? No. Okay. I will get back with Alta Fiber's attorney. We will get a clean copy. We will go one more time kind of through this to see if there's any changes that need to be made. But again, if we haven't had any issues as a city, then it probably doesn't need to be any changes. So that's all I have on that topic.
All right, thank you. Discussion number 2 is hazardous mitigation plan. We have Katie Jo Kirkpatrick here.
Hello, how are you all today? My name is Katie Jo Kirkpatrick. I work for
Oh, can you press the little button? Sorry, there you go. Thank you so much.
the other mic I was at today was a little bit too short, so I had to keep, so I've been through a lot of mics today. Like I said, my name is Katie Jo Kirkpatrick. I work for the Northern Kentucky Area Development District as their Strategic Initiative Manager. A little background on the ad, we were started in 1971. We do 8 counties. We represent 8 counties, which are Boone, Kent, and Campbell, Gallatin, Carroll, Grant, Owen, and Pendleton. Our divisions include aging and disabilities, which you might know about our waiver programs that you hear about. Our workforce division works to do employment connection, which relates to SNAP and TANF clients, and then also WIO clients, which here in Kenton County is the Kentucky Career Center in Covington. And then one of the divisions that you all hear most about is our local government services. So in this division, we talk about transportation planning, water quality planning, economic development strategy planning, and hazard mitigation. A lot of the things we do regional because we understand the importance of looking at the entire area. As you know, a tornado is not going to stop at the line in Kenton County, between Kenton County and Boone County. It doesn't really care what jurisdiction you are, and we want to make sure that all of our jurisdictions are prepared. Within those 8 counties, we have 52 jurisdictions, and this plan covers all of those. Basically, we work with FEMA to really understand what the mitigation is and what we need in our community. Throughout the planning process, it normally takes 2 years. We've done this in about 18 months. Within those 18 months, we've had 24 community meetings throughout the region. We've worked with our emergency managers, our fire chiefs, our police chiefs, our public admin, people within each community to really understand what is needed in our area for mitigation. So when you think of mitigation, you want to be, this is being prepared before an event. So when we think of FEMA, we always think of them coming in after an event. This is really to help the community when something does happen. How are we going to be resilient if something does happen? Within this planning process, we look at the risk and the different risks that we have in our communities. So that are tornadoes, hailstorms, windstorms, flooding, things like that. And then really understand what we need to do to be proactive. So the meat of the plan is our strategic our mitigation strategies. And basically, we've worked with those professionals to really understand what we need in our community, how to be proactive with cybersecurity, with warning systems, what we need to do to move to make things better. If a flood does happen, what do we need to move so people aren't in the flood zone anymore? Some other things that we've been working on in this mitigation strategy is really how to reach those populations that have some barriers or vulnerable. So a lot of our communication that we have in Northern Kentucky about emergency management, or if events happen, is in English. So we're looking at how do we do those notices that in a different language, so everyone knows like what to do if something happens. So last week was a great example with tornadoes. If English wasn't your primary language and those things were going off and the sirens were going off, if you didn't know what that meant, you didn't know where to go and all that. So we're trying to make sure that we have those in languages so others can understand and be able to get safe shelter if something does happen. Some other things that are in it are making sure that if we lose power, we have backup energy sources and generators. We always think of a generator, but it's just other alternative power sources to bring everybody back up. Also to improve some of our communications and our operational centers. Some of our communities, their emergency operational center is the senior citizens center in their community, and they really don't have a formula or a formalized location, and so it's helping them try to figure out the best way to serve their communities. Also, we talk about high hazard dams in this plan, which we have not done in the past, and so there's been some incidents in other parts of the state where dams have failed, and so that causes some flooding, and so we are working on creating some, working with our owners of those high hazard dams to make sure that if something does happen, they are able to mitigate that. That is a short, brief summary of it. You all did receive a packet of like a 9-page packet that kind of overviews the entire process and a link to the entire plan. It is a massive plan. I'm not going to lie. It is a lot in there. A lot of good information, but again, the main part is that mitigation strategy. Another thing we added to the plan this year was really the maintenance of it. The current plan we have is from 2017. If you do a little math, you realize that a 5-year plan in 2027 might be a little bit outdated right now. So we are in the process of, like I said, redoing our plan and making sure that yearly updates are included into the next 5 years. So we really have an understanding and a good baseline of what we've done in the each year to help with this plan. And we think about FEMA, and FEMA comes in with money once an event happens. This is money to help. This allows mitigation to help before that event happens. A lot of times communities look for FEMA money, mitigation money from FEMA. A little thing to tie to this plan is if your community doesn't have an approved plan, FEMA will not give you your check. So we do have a few communities that are waiting for their check to come from DC, and they're held up until we get this plan approved. Also, FEMA this go around has required us to get adoptions and resolutions from all 60 jurisdictions. I don't know if you can name all the ones that are here in Kenton County, but there's a lot. There's some our smaller counties who have a lot of cities also, and so we are working through that process right now. Currently, I have 20 signed resolutions in my possession, so I'm 1/3 of the way there. But again, it's just a process to get through them. My goal, currently, the plan is in the state level getting reviewed. The state will review that. They've had it for about a month and a half now. Once they review it, they'll come back with us for revisions. We'll make those revisions, then send it to FEMA. They'll, of course, will have edits and changes. We'll make those changes, and then we'll present the edited, revised plan to them along with those 60 signed jurisdictions. Internally, our goal to have all 60 of those signed is Derby, the 1st of May. So you all have a little bit of time to discuss this. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a question. So
Yes.
this takes a resolution that we'll have before us in April, and this is at once signed, is it good for 5 years? Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And within that resolution, you do have a sample one in the back of your packet. It does have language in there that's saying that those revisions that asked by FEMA, asked by the state, are, you'll accept those revisions. We won't make huge changes to the plan, just the revisions that are required. And then we'll vote on it again in 5 years when we rewrite it. All of our big documents like this are 5-year plans. And so we are really just, those will change, but nothing major of the concept will change.
And then if FEMA was making large or substantive changes to the plan, once we pass our resolution,
We can come back.
you could come back?
Yeah.
But you'll let us know as far as
Right.
what the final plan
Right.
and any changes?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the changes are going to just be more information, if anything. If they want to know exactly how high that water was when we flooded 2 years ago in that corner, those are going to be the things they're going to ask for. They gave us a policy that was very detailed of what we needed to follow to create this document, and so we went through and already made sure that we had as much as we knew to put into the plan from what they gave us as guidelines. And talking to our state representative about this, our state contact with this, he's like, yeah, you probably have everything you need. It will just be those little tidbits of additional information, like make sure that all of our communities, we have something about what flooding happened in there, which some of our communities don't have any flooding, so it will just be that.
Did we, as a city, sign this in 2017?
Yes.
That's because I thought, this sounds familiar to me. I thought it did. Okay.
Yes.
I thought so, but I wasn't.
So in the past, we would have come to you and talked to you about it, but we wouldn't required a adoption like we are this time. FEMA has added that great tidbit to their policy. We are aligning this plan with some of the other plans we do. We do a comprehensive economic development strategy required by EDA, so the Economic Development Agency out of Washington also. And so our 2 5-year plans, one talking about hazard mitigation, one talking about the infrastructure of economic development in our region, they are aligning. And so we have been adding things to our hazard mitigation plan that really complements the other plans that are required from the federal government for funding for different grants and different things throughout the region.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you explaining everything to us. All right. Last item up for discussion is hotel guest registry. Jack?
Yeah, I'll lead this off. And I first want to say that everyone saw this ordinance for the first time today. And a part of that was I was just wanting to kind of put in words on paper kind of what the concept was, because I thought just discussing this without some words on paper would be kind of a strange concept. But I just want to kind of lay some of the foundation as to how we got to this point, and then at any time if Chief Rader wants to step in, he can. So about, I'm going to say a year and a half ago, we passed updated nuisance laws which allowed our frequent property offenders to have some more aggressive measures. And when we say our frequent offenders, I mean people that are getting calls for police service primarily. And the problem, what we've run into from a practical perspective, is we are getting a lot of calls for service in the general area of a couple hotels in town, but it's not necessarily the hotels that are getting the calls for service. It's people who are in the parking lots, it's people who are getting pulled over nearby, it's other activities. So our strengthened nuisance ordinance that we were hoping would allow us to tackle some of the issues we're having really has not come to fruition, because again, the offenses are not necessarily the owners of the property themselves. It's frankly the tenants, or, I mean, am I misstating any of this?
No, that's correct.
So I think we were just kind of brainstorming internally, is there a way to better manage and to maybe put a little more onus on the hotels and motels to help us and provide us with data, meaning guest registry data, which then maybe will help law enforcement. So at this point, I'm going to kind of push over to you, because this is really more your wheelhouse.
I think you're doing fine. No, and I talked to some of you when I came in. One of the primary issues that we're seeing that is very hard for us to enforce or even really get any information on right now is who is living in the hotels. Right now, we have a suspicion that people are trading labor, i.e., cleaning rooms, painting the structure, working on it for extended stay in the hotel. We've looked at a couple of the KRSs, and it's very gray, again, on who can and cannot stay and what are the parameters, the time period. So for us specifically, when we look into this, the KSP sex offender registry is something that we are checking into, and it seems like maybe we have some people that are trying to use the hotels for their permanent residence. But right now, we have no way of proving through the hotel that that is actually the case. If this were to pass, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but I believe they would have to supply the actual list of tenants, whatever we would like to call them, that are currently at the facility. And that would give us as law enforcement an easy avenue to make sure that people are staying compliant on the sex offender registry, making sure that, when we see the Christmas tree set up in the room down there and they're telling us that, no, that's somebody different. Well, if they're providing us a name this week and then it's the same name next week and the week after, that gives us a little more bite into being able to, remove some of those people. So I think one of the questions was, does this mean that we can just get a name from the front desk and then march in and check the room? No. They still, have a reasonable expectation of privacy. This isn't violating anyone's rights. Generally speaking, what this will also do is kind of just verify, when an officer is on patrol and they run a license plate and they get some information back on the plate, it will be able to be, validated by going in, checking with the front desk and saying, is this person here? Okay, it's the same person that matches up on this license plate. Those warrants are active. We can go in and make the arrest too. So is there any questions, concerns, comments that you have specifically for me? Vicki?
I wanted to know about, it's under Section A, number 2. It says license number, make, and type of all automobiles. Because I was telling somebody, I said if I checked into a hotel and they wanted to know all the automobiles, I don't remember the license tag of my husband.
Yeah.
Is it just the one I'm driving?
Yeah, and I
at that
can
particular
clarify
time?
that. And this is kind of a Frankenstein. So I've taken 3 different city ordinances and kind of, in my thought, taken the most aggressive approach of each of the 3 city ordinances. Doesn't mean we can't pare it back. But this is a combination of, was it Springboro? Was it jurisdiction in Ohio? Somewhere in Ohio, Fort Wright and Fort Mitchell. And Fort Mitchell took the most aggressive approach as far as requiring data. Fort Wright probably took the least approach. Both Fort Wright and Fort Mitchell's ordinances have been around for at least 20 plus years. It looked like Fort Mitchell's was actually around since the 80s. I don't know how often they use it. I know when you spoke with the chief of Fort Wright.
Yeah, I spoke with Chief Butler today, and he said that they actually used this ordinance last week to help with an investigation. He said that it's been on the books since 2004 there. He wasn't exactly sure why it came about. He just knew that it had come about in 2004, and they do use it, and it's been pretty helpful to law enforcement there. I mean, I forget what the name of the hotels were there by the interstate, but I know they used this extensively to shut down some of those problem areas over the last probably 10 years, so.
But, I mean, we can, I mean, this is literally open for discussion for anything. I mean, maybe this is too far, maybe this isn't far enough. The other thing that is a kind of a distinction, this is specifically addressing hotels and motels, and is specifically defining that as something that has over 6 rooms. Fort Mitchell, and maybe they didn't intend it, but it's ended up happening this way and they haven't amended it. Fort Mitchell's would apply to short-term rentals and Airbnbs as well. And I frankly specifically excluded those because we're not really seeing those as the issues, and I thought that would really put a lot of onus on a lot of people, where the 4 or 5 hotel motels we have in town, my thought would be is maybe we even, I don't know what kind of relationship we have with the owners, maybe we kind of take a proposed ordinance to the managers or owners of these hotels and say, hey, this is for your help. What practically can we, how practical are these things, right? And we've all gone to hotels, right? And there are certain jurisdictions you do go to and they ask you for a lot of information. You're like, am I in a rough area? Like, why are you asking me all this stuff? But it's not unusual, I find, in a lot of hotels to get this information. Like, I don't find it that unusual as I go up and down the interstate traveling.
The other question I had was, I think a lot of homeless people stay at some of these, and how do you do that? I mean, because they're not going to have necessarily a car. Some of them do. They live in their cars, but I don't know. Would that help us with that issue also?
I'm not really aware of any homeless people that are using the hotels. We have not run into that issue, so I can't really answer that per se, but.
Yeah, and I think, I guess we can say if available, but then we're maybe defeating the purpose a little bit too, right? I think at the end of the day, what we're really, the people we're concerned with is the people who are living in the hotels. I mean, that at the end of the day are the people that we are concerned with that have just sort of escaped detection in our community, frankly. And unfortunately, with the zoning laws, because we looked at the whole concept, because there's kind of this general perception out there that you cannot stay at a hotel over 30 days. That's really not the case. Our zoning law says that a hotel motel is primarily for users that are under 30 days. So it doesn't say exclusive, it says primarily. And when you look at the state statutes on it, again, it's kind of inferred that people are going to be short-term renters in hotels, but there's no real law there. So I think a part of this is to try to get a log of who's actually staying there and, that they're getting detected. Yes, Ms. Reckers, I'm sorry. I know you had your hand up first, oh, good. Just speak if you all want to speak.
So how enforceable is this, each adult occupant? Like how is that even enforceable? What if somebody's in the car, not inside the lobby at check-in?
Sure. I'm with you. I mean, I agree, but I mean, sure. But I think we could, certainly, if we're seeing a situation where there's 4 or 5 people that are living in a unit, and we go to the registry and there's only one adult there, I think that would allow us to at least tell the manager, hey, you got 4 or 5 people that we're noticing have been here for 2 weeks. You need to get them to fill out the registry. I mean, I think this at least gives us an opportunity to have that discussion. I'm not saying that we, it's not foolproof by any stretch of the imagination. I agree with you there. Yes, Ms.
I think we're not going after people who are just staying in hotels because they're staying in hotels. We're trying to use this to get some teeth to go to find people who, like Kyle said, are undetectable, or I don't know who said that, but somehow have kind of flown under the radar because they are staying in a hotel and aren't as easily trackable or traceable. I don't know what the right word is, but we're not just looking to throw people out of hotels because we feel like it. We're looking for people who are staying in hotels and also have a warrant, an active warrant, or also have done other things and maybe, aren't on the sex offender registry, aren't complying with things like that. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, and this actually is coming up at a good time. This week in last week in one of the chiefs' meetings, we learned that from KSP, the sex offender registry, they're actually allowing people to list themselves as homeless, which this would be very good for us to be able to go down and see who is registering in these hotels, and if we are running into the issues that I suspect we may, have an avenue to get those people back on paper, back in the court system, and avoiding the detection that right now, basically, the hotels, as they sit right now, are kind of a safe harbor for, as long as you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And that's what I would like to change.
Yeah, and I think there's also a deterrent effect to this potentially, right? Because the reality is a lot of the hotels on the interstate from Michigan to Miami are havens for sex trafficking, drug trafficking, illegal activities. So, if we have hotels that are interstate that say, hey, I need a copy of your driver's license, you need to sign this form, maybe you'll say, we'll go down the exit south next time. I mean, I think that's the hope. I don't think this is a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination. But right now, we're kind of faced with the dilemma that we have a couple of hotels that we know a lot's going on, and we don't really have a way to deal with it. So this is kind of an experiment, maybe is the best way to put it.
So, Chief Rader, what you're saying is if a sex offender says, if they register as homeless and we find that they're actually living in a motel, then we can go back and say, this person needs to register with this address. Or at least we have a way of sort of tracking them
That's
down.
a possibility, and from the way it was explained to me is under the new system, it is the responsibility of the person that's on the registry to once a month report to their office and tell them, and they literally said that my new location is the park bench on Dixie Highway. That's how specific they have to be when they're reporting their homeless location. It would just be nice for us to be able to also, we have a sergeant that deals exclusively with the registry. It would be nice for him to be able to report back and say, we were out with so-and-so, and this is where they're staying, this is the room. If they don't report this month, you know where to find them.
Yeah, I like that. if for no other reason, we do this for that reason, because I have zero desire to create a safe harbor for any sex offenders. The other thing I was going to say is, to kind of echo what other people have said, I don't think it's that uncommon, actually, to ask for the ID and the automobile. I know, when my family goes on vacation, we typically make it a 2-day trip there, and we typically try to stay somewhere that's close off we stay at the same places most of the time, but almost every single time they have asked for, and these aren't sketchy places by any means, but they ask for the ID of every adult, and they ask for every vehicle that you're driving that's going to be parked in their parking lot. And I'm sure there's multiple reasons that they're asking for that. They don't want other people parking there that aren't staying in the hotel, and they're trying to keep, their parking lot for guests only. But, I'm sure there's other reasons that they're asking for it. It never really occurred to me why until I read this, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. So, I don't think it's that unusual. And, yeah, it's a little bit of a burden on the person that's staying in the hotel if every adult's not there, but it's not that big of a burden to ask for the ID of everybody, to get that information. I don't think that's as big of a problem.
I don't think I've ever not shown my ID when I've checked into a hotel. I know they're not allowed to retain a copy of your ID. That's federal, but they can document the information. So.
Yeah.
I think the issue isn't so much the burden of having to produce that information for the guests. The burden is producing the information as the hotel. And I think I can safely say that not all hotels in Erlanger are producing the same amount of problems for the city. And I guess it would be my goal that this ordinance be crafted in a way that we make sure that, many, many chiefs in the future and many, many administrations in the future, 100 years from now, don't use this ordinance as a way to punish people who may not be a problem. So I think we need to probably put a little bit more detail of who can request the information. Right now it says the city of Erlanger. That means that Chief Rader could go in there at 8 o'clock and ask for the information, and then Peter could go in there at 10 o'clock and ask for the information, and then noon, Jack could go there and ask, and then, 2 o'clock, Councilman Hermes could ask. All in the same day. So I think there should probably be some kind of verbiage about that. And Jack, by the way, I definitely appreciate that you started with this. This is a great starting point. So I'm not criticizing at all.
Like I said, this was literally just words on paper to just get the conversation started.
I'm just trying to be helpful on this. I think this could be helpful. So I think we should probably also put some kind of verbiage in there that would give the city reason to ask for the information. I think it'd be fair to say that if the city suspects that an occupant is using it for permanent housing instead of temporary or transient housing, I think that'd be okay. I think it would also be okay to say that we're not going to check more than weekly to compare against the previous list, or something, or whatever that timeline might be, that it might make sense.
Well, and that's why it might make sense to go to the hotels and say, hey, do you want to just self-report? Give us the list once a month. Do you want to, I don't know what they would want to do. So I agree with you that I think no one would anticipate every 5 minutes someone from Erlanger asking for the list.
Right.
But I do think we don't want to limit our opportunities that when we see a suspicious car or suspicious person, we can't say, oh, wait, we got to wait 6 days. So,
Yeah, and I think something that we could probably do to maybe ease your mind on that is maybe anything with an investigation that is assigned an official report number through dispatch, because just like criminal history, I can't run a criminal history without having an official report number through Kenton County Dispatch. And then that way, there would be a log of who was asking and when and why. So, if the hotel was to come up here and say, hey, why are you, asking yesterday and then you asked again today, we'd be able to supply at least a little bit of information as to what the official use was, instead of, somebody's bored on third shift and just wants to go check the registry.
Right. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great start. And I think so we would probably try to clarify it that it's the police, the Erlanger police can ask for this information, right? Or,
I would say police or code enforcement
okay,
and fire.
Fire, yeah, I was going to say fire,
okay.
but not council people.
I can't see any reason that general gov would need it from a business license perspective, but I don't know.
Should we give the hotel a timeline to produce the information? Or does it have to be available, at the snap of a fingers when we show up?
Look in their books.
I mean, that's something to think about. Maybe we can give them, if I'm thinking of myself as a hotel manager and someone comes and asks for this information and I've got a line of 20 people that are trying to check in, I'm like, man, this is one more thing. It'd be nice to have some breathing room, hour or something to be able to produce this.
Any other comments? Yes.
I've got more.
Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the one thing I would like it to clarify as well is what is the violation? So we talk about a lot of the detail of the provisions for penalty and things like that. I'd like to clarify what the violation is. Is the violation that they are not producing the list, or that it's not available quick enough, or what exactly is the penalty that we're saying here? Or what is the penalty for?
So the cause, I guess, I would think that would be just for not providing the registry, not actually doing what they were supposed to do by ordinance.
Either not keeping the documents or not producing it when it's requested.
That
Okay.
would be my suggestion.
Okay,
Or letting people stay at the hotel without providing the information.
Right.
okay. Thank you, that's all I had.
Sorry.
Jack, as I replied back to you today, thank you for sending this. I guess just being used to traveling, I've usually provided this information, no questions or anything. And I do think people that would not provide this may have something to hide, because I think every time you go to a hotel, you typically give them your license number, your ID, and so forth. Or if you meet family members there, like Jennifer said, you register all the vehicles. I do agree. I think it should be police, fire department, and code enforcement. I don't know that I would agree with police and fire having to give notice to ask, because what if there's suspicious car on this shift, or 3 hours later there's something else? Now, code enforcement, I can see maybe they would have to give some type of notice to request, but fire and police, I would think they would not have to. That's just my opinion. But I do like how we're working on this, because I wasn't aware that it wasn't common practice. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Jasper Lucas.
I was just going to echo what Ms. Nicely said about the time frame. I wouldn't want to give too much time, because if the motel owner or the employees are in cahoots with the criminals, then basically we're giving them a pass to say, hey, you need to get out of here in X number of hours because I got to give the police this information. I don't, saying they have to provide it instantly, I don't really see that there's a problem with that, because if we've got enough of a concern to go ask, then I think that needs to be acted on immediately. You know, I realize that they might be busy, but if there's criminal activity taking place, we need to get it taken care of. So maybe something like a reasonable amount of time, but again, that's kind of a vague word. I don't know. I would hate to put some kind of time frame on it to say an hour or 24 hours or something like that, because I feel like that's basically opening up the door to say, you know, get out of here because I got to tell the cops that you registered.
Yeah, and I guess the way I envision this, and maybe I'm naive, is that the hotel would have a form, maybe it's a form we provide them, and they literally have the person fill it out, someone verifies the information, and then they put it in a binder. Like, that's how I would envision it. So at any time, okay, police officer, here's the binder. Like, I don't know if I see it as that draconian on a hotel to have to provide that information. But again, maybe I'm naive on that.
I think it should be readily available at all times, especially when you think about the fire department in the case of a disaster, tornado or a fire, you know, so that way they could get the information they need it super duper quick to find out how many people are in the hotel.
Yeah, but it's not static. You know, it's changing every day. So, I mean, how often do they update that, or the printout or the binder in the course of a day? I mean, every time a new guest comes in, then you rip the old one out and put the new printout in? I mean, I think it's okay to give them a time. I mean, really, if we went to them and said, you got an hour, and the hotel owner goes and they chase out all the bad people before the hour's over, then we should thank them. We just took the burden off the police department.
Yeah, I mean, my only thing to that is we know what the end result is really going to be. That they're down in the creek until the cruiser pulls out of the parking lot, and then they're back. So, and we don't know who that would have been. So,
I don't think any of us have a problem with engaging in the hotels and motels and say, hey, how can we facilitate this? How do we not make this a burden on you? Understand we're all in this together. You don't want bad people in your hotel. We don't want to have bad people in your hotel. And we're just trying to have better accountability of who's in your hotel. You should want this, right? I mean, because again, I think at the end of the day, I'm not even sure these are ownership issues. I think it's management issues. I'm not ignoring you. You're next, Ms. Reckers. Again, we don't have to, it's just, but maybe, you know, maybe that's helpful to get their information. And again, maybe my gut would be is, and I'll just use Hampton as an example because I don't think we have one in the city. I'm guaranteeing you that they probably, best practices of all these major chains probably is requiring these people to get this data already and might already have some system in place for it. Would be my guess. Yes, Ms. Reckers.
My actual question was going to be, how do we know that these 7 hotels don't currently have those record-keeping controls in place, right?
We don't until we have a discussion with them, right? We haven't had that discussion yet.
Well, I don't know about getting them involved to write the ordinance, but saying, listen, this is coming down the pike. What do you, like, what would that look like for you to produce? Because it's not going to be in a, sometimes it's, a lot of people, these businesses are paperless. It's 2024, right? So it's probably something that they could print on command, or on demand rather, or command, I don't know. But I think asking or seeing what these other jurisdictions have established and what they ask to be produced, I mean, this may be something that is as simple as pushing a button.
I have no issue at all if we have a list of the owners. I know we know a couple of the owners. I don't really know how well our systems are to be able to track all of the owners of the hotels and motels. We probably have that data somewhere, but I have no issue sending out letter, sending out email, saying, hey, this is what we're about to embark. I mean, we don't have to do this in 2 weeks, right? This is something that's we've been discussing internally how to just deal with this larger issue for a while. And get their input, no issue there. I mean, I would hope someone would provide input. We might send letters and emails to owners and it'd be crickets. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how often either one of you have talked to any of the owners of these hotels or motels.
So, I mean, we have requested information from them, and I think we all know that people are living in the hotels. We're being told they're not, so I don't think they're actually forthcoming with any legitimate information right now. If they have a system in place, they certainly have not volunteered any of that information.
I had another idea.
Ms. Records had her hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask what the definition of permanent was, and then, I mean, there's many times where people are displaced for whatever the circumstances, fire, lightning strike, whatever may keep them out of their homes. Is it, like, what is the actual code say about long-term rentals?
There isn't one. That's my point. That definition is gray. It's vague.
Yeah, because, I mean, in 1994, my family lived in the Holiday Inn off Mineola until our house was ready for like 6 weeks, like, I'm just saying, it's not unlawful to, it's not against the law to be homeless, it's not against the law to be a long-term.
And I don't think we're trying to criminalize any of that
Yeah.
behavior. I think we're just trying to get an idea of who's there.
Yeah, if that's the intent, is to establish who's there, not necessarily be any sort of, have there be any sort of enforcement around long-term rental or long-term tenancy in a hotel, right? Like, I don't know. Just want to make sure that we are clear on what the expectation is that's going to come out of this, because there's nothing wrong with staying in a hotel for 30 days, unless there's something wrong with, like, unless we have a supporting code that would.
But that's the issue, is there is nothing wrong with that. So, but unfortunately, it's a good way to dodge detection of everything, including taking your kids to school, because nobody has record of these people. That's the problem, is the folks like your family or my family. I mentioned that in an internal meeting that, hey, for about 4 months, we stayed at a hotel while our house was getting built. It happens, right? Those are probably why the law is kind of vague on that. But those aren't really the people that we're worried about either, right? I mean, we're worried about the people that are avoiding detection because they want to avoid detection for some reason.
There's another issue here too, though. I mean, the hotels aren't meant to be apartments. It's a different zone. We have a zoning issue as well here. And so we have a legitimate concern with people turning a hotel into an apartment building. So that's a realistic reason for us to not want to have long-term tenants in something that's not zoned for that. I think maybe the better way of getting around that is to maybe more clearly define what transient is, or what we would consider transient, or what we consider a normal hotel stay. That doesn't mean that someone can't stay there beyond whatever it might be, 5 or 6 days. It just means that starts to raise our awareness, or maybe gives us a little red flag that we might try to start paying attention.
Agree if we have the data that someone's staying there more than 30 days.
Right.
But right now, we don't have that data.
Agreed, yeah. So I don't have anything against that. So I'm just saying that I think we can craft this to be a pretty doggone good ordinance. I do think
But as far as defining transient, and if we're doing anything with zoning, that would not be this document. That would be a text amendment that we would have to change our definition of hotel and motel. Because right now, and I'm kind of going off memory, I know I sent it out to folks, if you all remember, fire away, but I'm pretty sure that the definition currently of hotel is specifically says, a dwelling where people primarily stay less than 30 days. I mean, it's kind of vague, really.
Okay.
But maybe, again, that's okay for these extended stay. I mean, I don't think we have one in Erlanger, but I think Florence has an extended stay, right? It is more of a month-to-month situation.
Yeah. Another idea I had that might be good to add to this registry, or at least add to the record keeping that we should have, is the manager's information. we should know how to, who their managers are and how to contact them. I don't think we have that right now, or do we? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be good to have that, and I don't think it would be a problem to provide that as part of this data.
The fire department does have, every occupancy we go into for our inspections, we try to get contact information, usually up to 3 people. So we do have some of that information that we could share.
I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson?
Yeah, provision. I'm sorry. Will there be a provision to let the public or the guests know or made aware that their information will be given, accessible when asked?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's, I don't think that would be awful, but I think Tyson's right. I think it would be up to the hotel to disclose that to somebody, that this is, I mean, when you get right down to it, if it's disclosed to us, it's now subject to open records, but we would obviously be able to redact clearly personal information from that. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question that we could deal with.
Sorry, Ms. Kyle was next, and then Jennifer.
Well, my husband worked for the Marriott for years, and I know people shared that information, and if they had any problems, yeah, they would share it with the law or the fire or whatever, because you have to. But I was thinking too, this might, if you find somebody that's staying there longer, this might be like an invitation for our social worker to go in and say, hey, I noticed you've been staying here pretty long. Do you mind sharing with me, or however she goes about it, because I'm not a social worker. But that would give us some information. Maybe we can help them. Unless it's like, somebody waiting for their house to be completed. I understand that. But I'm surprised we have not had this ordinance before. And I would think that the state would have an ordinance for hotels and motels on their records. Now, whether, we just want to go with their stuff or add our own, I mean, that's up to us.
I can tell you the state is very, very lean on hotels. And I learned this from another community where a person tried to get around paying the short-term rental fees because they had a group of short-term rentals that were all grouped together. So they applied to the state to be a hotel, which was exempt from our short-term rental ordinance. And we really thought that that would be a barrier, but the state, frankly, just sort of didn't do a whole lot to approve them as a hotel. So I was surprised that the state really doesn't have a lot of monitoring. I think they defer a lot to probably fire. Probably the fire marshal has more authority in these situations than anybody.
Yeah, and then there's always the case of, like somebody mentioned before, that people stay at a hotel and then they sneak other people in, because typically most places will charge you by person. And so you're going to have people there that aren't really registered. And I mean, that's not the hotel's fault, unless they notice it, then they can call the police. But I'm just saying, there's some loopholes to it, but I think we ought to do something. And this is a good start.
I was actually going to say the same thing that Vicki said. The only other thing I would mention is, I know, Jack, you said that you left out short-term rentals like Airbnbs on purpose, but I wonder if there's any reason to just go ahead and put it in. I don't know. Do we?
Yeah, I mean, that's what y'all,
From a police and fire perspective, I realize it's not, Erlanger's not a hot spot for Airbnbs, maybe like Covington is, but if we foresee this becoming, more popular, where there are more Airbnbs popping up, and we do start having issues, or are we already seeing those, would it be worth it to just go ahead and put that in here rather than leaving it out on purpose? I'm going to defer to police and fire on that, because I don't know.
I mean, we have not had any issues with that. I think historically, at least from what I see, the appeal to the hotels is the cost. We looked it up, can't remember who it was. We looked it up the other day, or actually it was tonight at roll call. And you can get a room for $50, $60 at our hotels. I don't think you're getting an Airbnb, and that's maybe a little different clientele.
I also think that the people who maybe need something more long-term, like beyond 30 days, like they're waiting for their house to be finished, or their house has been damaged in a fire and they need someplace longer-term to stay. Those are the folks who are looking maybe at an Airbnb instead of a hotel because of the convenience of it, and it is typically a full house and not just a hotel room. So if there's not an issue now, I don't see any reason to put it in. I just didn't know if maybe there was a reason to go ahead and put it in if we were seeing, are we seeing people having large parties or anything like that we're having to, respond. But it sounds like maybe that's not a problem.
Yeah, I don't think either Chief nor I have seen any issues, knock on wood.
So we'll go back to the drawing board. We've got great feedback tonight, really appreciate it. We will reach out to the current hotel owners that are responsive, and we'll probably come back at the next caucus meeting to discuss it again. All right, and I just realized I misstated something, so we're going to come back to the drawing board on the franchise agreement as well. I confirmed with Kara, who, if she's on vacation or something, she was wonderful in responding back to me tonight. Okay. We are actually collecting a fee on this cable franchise, so we're going to get the numbers on that, and that might be a broader discussion as we renew this franchise agreement, so we'll bring this back to the table as well. I don't think it's a huge number that we're getting off cable, certainly not like what we're getting from the other utilities, but I misstated on that. So that's all I have.
All right, do I entertain a motion that we adjourn? Ms. Ruckers, Ms. Kyle, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Have a good evening.